Ryan here with Prudential Pest Solutions, and in this video we're going to show you some common ways that squirrels, specifically gray squirrels, but also flying squirrels, get into homes, and then what you can do or what we can do, number one, to get them out of there, and more importantly, how we're going to keep them out. So when we're talking about any kind of squirrel, and again, specifically gray squirrels or flying squirrels, red squirrels too, we're looking up high onto the house. So in this case, we're on a commercial building, but it's the same kind of process for this building as it is for most houses. So we're up on the roof, and one of the things that we want to look for is, number one, their entryway. So here you're going to see that where the flashing meets the roof, you can see I stick my arm all the way underneath there, and that's on the end too. I wonder what the squirrels are doing is they're getting in underneath that flashing, and then they have free run into that soffit and then into the attic space. So this is actually an office building, and the upstairs office was like, hey, we're hearing squirrels above. So really the first step is determining, number one, if it's squirrels or if it's mice. And we have some tips on what to listen for if you suspect one or the other. But this just shows us the roof, and it's a good example of what typical home construction is. So this is shingled roofs. These other roofs that are coming off of here are called dormers. And what I'm doing is we got to check each and every one of those, because where those roofs meet the other roof are common entryways. And you can see in years past they had an issue there where squirrels used to get in, and you can see somebody else put some nice metal flashing there. And the way that the squirrels are getting onto this roof are most commonly trees. So there's some trees overhanging the building here, and the squirrels are using the trees as kind of just a natural ladder to get onto the roof. And we're going to make sure the whole building is sealed up. So what you're going to see in this section of the video is you're going to see us install what's called a one-way door, which allows, we install it over the opening that the squirrels are using, and allows the squirrels to leave but not come back in. And then we often incorporate trapping with that, because why it's important to seal up the rest of the building, even if you are doing trapping, is that I like to use the analogy, like, let's say you went out to dinner and you came home and somebody had changed the locks on your house. Well, you're not just going to try the front door and then can't get in, you're just going to move. You're going to try to get back in some way. And squirrels are the same way. So if we eliminate their main entryway, if we don't make sure the rest of the building is sealed up, then they're just going to find another way in and possibly cause more damage. So that's why it's important to seal up, and also do some trapping if you need to as well, to get those nuisance squirrels out of there. So you can see all I'm going to need for this project here to get the squirrels out and to do some sealing is I have some 1/4-inch hardware cloth, which is like a thicker, more sturdy chicken wire. I have a drill, I have some screws, and I have some sealant. And that's really it. And some metal snips just to cut the hardware cloth, because it's metal. For the screws, I like to use what are called metal lath screws, which have like a bigger head on them. It just helps me grip on to the one-way door a little bit easier. And you can see my one-way door, it's actually spring-loaded. And you'll see later in the video, I have some other videos and pictures of a one-way door. But it basically has a spring-loaded door in it. So when the squirrels are exiting, they push through that door and they can leave easily, no problem. But when they come back in, the door only opens one way, which is why it's called a one-way door. So they can't get back in through the same way. Now, we have to make sure, though, that this door is securely attached to the building. And you can't just, as tempting as it may be, you can't just put a screw straight down through the shingles, because, well, number one, it wouldn't hold, because shingles are pretty thick, and we're not using that thick of a screw. But more importantly, you don't want to cause additional damage to the building. So the squirrels are already in the attic space. They're wreaking havoc in there. And we don't want to add moisture issues on top of that, because this is a relatively new roof. So we never just want to screw or put anything down right into the shingle. So an alternative that we use here, especially when the flashing has a big gap between there and the shingle, is we're going to use some sealant. We're going to use some of that hardware cloth, and we're going to kind of just fill that gap up. And it does two things. One, it keeps squirrels and mice and other things from getting back in, but also it looks good, right? Because we don't want to just put some god-awful looking thing onto the front of a building or a house or something like that. We try to, find a balance between function and aesthetics. So you can see I'm just trying to finagle my tools here, because, it may not be very obvious, but we're on a roof. It's not the steepest pitch, but things keep rolling off. So I'm just going to use my metal my metal snips here, and we're just going to cut right through this hardware cloth. Very easy to cut. Get a general size of what we're going to do. And then what's going to happen is when I put this hardware cloth in, it's going to kind of secure the one-way door a bit more too, because in this case, it's gray squirrels, and gray squirrels are, as opposed to mice or something like that, they're pretty large, they're pretty strong. So we don't want them to be able to just rip this door off on their way out, or them trying to get back in and just rip the door off. We got to make sure everything's pretty tight. So you see here, I'm just going to put the metal screws right through it. We're going to secure it to the flashing. And then I'm going to run some sealant through that gap there. So not only will it keep animals and mice out, but it'll also help keep some water out of there too. We're going to do the same thing at the bottom. Now the sealant that I use, it's in a black colored expansion foam, kind of similar to the yellow or the orange great stuff you'd find at the hardware store. But unlike that, this product we can put actually on a foam gun, which allows us to start and stop the flow immediately, which just makes it look a lot nicer. And the black color, it just looks like a shade spot on the roof. You wouldn't even see it unless I pointed it out to you. So again, it's functional, it's hard forming, it keeps that hardware cloth and that one-way door in place, it seals everything up, but it also looks nice. So we're just going to run some sealant through there, make sure all the gaps and crevices are closed up. So the one-way door is not, it's even though it looks like a cage, it's just a big opening that allows them to leave. So we're not actually trapping them with this device. We're simply changing the locks, right? Like they're allowed to leave, but they can't come back. And then depending on the situation, it's probably a good idea to do some trapping just to make sure, because sometimes when you get the squirrels out of these attics and these homes, they just want to get back in so badly that you just have to get them out of there. You have to trap and just remove them from the area. So now we're going to deal with this front part here. And this was a pretty large opening. So what I decided to do was cut some hardware cloth, bend it, put it under where the flashing meets the shingles, and then we're going to seal over top of it. And then that sealant is going to seal up firm in there, and they're not going to be able to push or chew through it. Now you want to make sure that when we apply the sealant and we apply the screening and the meshing and the hardware cloth in there, that we're not obstructing the squirrel from actually being able to use the door, because that would defeat the purpose. So we're not just injecting sealant and hardware cloth in there haphazardly. We want to make sure that we're sealing up the opening. It looks nice, but yet the one-way door is still functional, still allows the squirrel to leave. So we're just going to cut another big piece here. And again, this is 1/4 inch. I just happen to have this on my van at the time. I like 1/2 inch as well. Both sturdy, both very good products. They don't rust. It's really easy to work with, easy to cut, and you could just get it right in there. Now we could use flashing in here too. But this gap was so large, and trying to match the color of flashing, it can be kind of difficult. And like I said, because it's a darker shingle, we'll just put the mesh in there, and then we'll put the sealant right over top of it into the gap, and you'll never see it. So now I'm just sliding the hardware cloth in there. I'm going to kind of scoot it forward, again, making sure I'm just checking that we're not obstructing the squirrel's way to get out of there. Nope, everything looks good. And then we're just going to put some sealant through there and just seal that gap. And what this also does is, since we're closing up this whole area minus, leaving that door open, is that when the squirrel comes to leave, like they do every day, they're more likely to use that one-way door, because that's the only daylight that they can see. That's the only air that they can feel. It's just coming through that door. So they're like, hey, yep, this is the way out. And we typically will leave these up for at least a week, just because, like with anything else, with any change, sometimes animals can be kind of leery. So we just want to make sure everything's out of there before we close everything up. So that one-way door is on. You can see there's a close-up. Again, we're super close to it. If you're on the ground, you don't even see the sealant. You don't see anything up there other than, the one-way door, and then that'll come down. So here's another example where common areas where squirrels get in. This is a louvered vent called a gable vent. This was actually made of wood. This is an older building. We could see the one-way door. This is how it works. See, they're going to leave, but they can't come back in. And we can actually see on the wood behind the door where the squirrel had actually chewed a pretty big hole to get in. So that's how they were getting into this attic space. So in this case, we screened off the whole gable vent from the outside, which is I always recommend the outside. And then we cut a little hole, put the one-way door up, and we're going to get them out that way. And there's just another shot. It shows you, we already screened it off, but you can just see the damage to the wood of the gable vent there. Now this is a little bit different of a squirrel excluder here. So this is a cone, a wildlife cone, and what it is like a tapered funnel. So you can see I'm pointing the direction. This is a metal ridge vent on top of a roof. Not so common anymore. Usually these are plastic now, and they're a little bit more integrated into the roof itself. But this is a metal ridge vent, aluminum. Squirrels were on the roof, and they had chewed right through it. So we screened it off. We put this cone on, and the cone is tapered in such a way that the squirrels can leave and not come back in. So this is we're just showing some other damage. So soffits, anywhere the flashing meets. These are just common ways for squirrels to get onto the roof. And then if you have squirrels on the roof, they're not just there poking around and having a good time. They're looking for a way in. So always make sure your trees are trimmed back. I say at least 10 feet. Sometimes that's not possible. But it's just a good gauge to get stuff off of your roof, get the branches off so that you don't have access to the roof for animals like squirrels. So if you have a squirrel issue, give Prudential Pest Solutions a call. We are the squirrel and wildlife experts. We're licensed by the Pennsylvania Game Commission. We do this all the time, and we're very good at it.